It's one of life's great mysteries, and the thing we most want to control, aging. But inside every one of us is the ability to live forever. Can nature teach us how to extend our lives?
There is no limit to how long an animal can live.
If we can unlock that genetic potential, how far could we push it?
The answer probably is in the order of 300, 400, 500 years.
And it's never too late to turn back the clock.
Even when you're 50, you can increase your lifespan.
In the next hour, nature's golden oldies reveal new secrets for how to live longer. The animal kingdom has some long-lived record breakers. Who holds the title for the oldest species on the planet and has been alive since the last ice age? This animal was discovered by Charles Darwin and is still alive today. How has it lived across 2 centuries? And if science can triple the lifespan of a fly, can it do it for us? Believe it or not, some of it comes down to what we all do naturally. Sex. It puts you on the planet, and some aging scientists believe is one of the biggest factors that determines the day you die. At the Institute of Health and Aging in the UK, Professor Tom Kirkwood, a world's authority on the science of aging, is trying to find out why.
The key to understanding the differences in the rate of aging, how long an animal lives, really have a lot to do with how that animal organises its sex life. So if, for example, you're a shrew, then you're producing lots of babies and having litters of babies quite often because, in particular, shrews live a very dangerous kind of life and they get eaten by predators very readily. Then you need a body that's geared towards making babies fast.
Sex evolved because of a need to pass on genes, whereas the body is disposable. But the question is, how long do you have? Not very long if you're a shrew. The shrew is near the bottom of its food chain, and so is lots of predators' favourite junk food. These male water shrews are fighting over a female. Their fights are short but very intense, with each male trying to slash his opponent. With a lifespan of only 18 months, the stakes are high. In a fight this savage, there can only be one winner.
If you go to the other end of the spectrum and imagine that you're an elephant, and now your reproduction takes much longer, you have fewer offspring, and so you need a body that is not going to age as quickly.
Elephants can afford to take their time when it comes to sex because they've evolved a different strategy. They have few natural predators and can live for up to 70 years. Their lifespan may be longer, but the purpose is the same: to pass on their genes. When bull elephants spar over a female, each male is testing the other's strength with trunk wrestling and head-to-head ramming. It's the strongest bull who wins. The victor will check out if a cow is in heat and will chase her until she finally gives in. with 6 tons of bull elephant on top, luckily for the female, sex lasts only 20 seconds. In a longer-lived animal like the elephant, because sex occurs later in life, reproduction in the female is delayed, and she will just raise 1 or 2 young. These babies are nursed up to 9 years and have strong social bonds with the rest of the herd. And when it comes to reproduction and life expectancy, we're not too different from elephants. Both humans and elephants have the genetic potential to live to 70, but the reality is we need science to help us last the course. Physiologist Dawn Skelton from the University of Manchester in the UK is breaking new ground in how to make us live longer.
We can learn from nature about reproduction. Animals that reproduce on a very fast rate and reproduce from a very young age die much younger than those animals that reproduce at a slow rate and tend to reproduce at a later age. The baby boomers of today are actually doing the right thing by chasing their career, basically having children much later, because all the evidence is that the later you actually reproduce, the longer your lifespan will be. After about the age of 30, we see a reduction in a hormone called estrogen in women. And in fact, the longer we leave it to have our first child, we're actually going to give ourselves a big burst of estrogen, which will help in all sorts of things, in muscle, in bone, and in nervous function. So all of these things are useful. It also means that the later we reproduce, the less we reproduce. In other words, we're not going to have lots of children, and the more children we have, the bigger toll it has on our body.
So how long you live could be a compromise between having babies and looking after your body. But what happens if you have sex too early? Do you die young? Some creatures do, and for these, life ends quickly with a big bang. Members of the carp and salmon families expend a huge investment in swimming upstream to spawn. As the Pacific salmon goes for broke, it invests all its energy in sex and dies shortly afterwards. They're losers in the long life stakes, living for only a few years. In humans, research shows that women who give birth later and start their families later tend to die later. And don't confuse having babies with sex. A healthy sex life can have enormous benefits, especially if you keep going into old age. As we get older, testosterone levels drop in both men and women. Having sex produces more testosterone, which may help keep our hearts in good shape.
All the evidence shows that those older people who still maintain an active sex life have a much better outlook on life, are much more positive about life. And in fact, some of the trials of the oldest population, i.e. the 90s and above, show that even up to 20% of them are still actively engaged in sex. However, we must remember that sex, in effect, is just physical activity. It's increasing the heart rate, it's improving metabolism, and importantly, it's reducing stress. So all these things will help improve lifespan.
But is sex the only factor in increasing lifespan?
Part of this picture is to bring in the issue of size, and size does matter in terms of length of life. Partly, of course, if you're a big animal, then it takes you longer to reach sexual maturity, and so you have to have a longer lifespan to be able to accommodate all of that growing up and maturing and then reproducing.
And one class of mammals top the size charts: the whales. In the cold waters of the Arctic, the Inuit people have hunted the bowhead whale for thousands of years. Each spring they voyage out in their wooden boats to take on the whales. In the past, they used spears and arrowheads, but now they use steel harpoons. At 18 meters in length, the bowhead whale is a formidable catch. The full-grown adult weighs up to 100 tons. That's the same as 13 double-decker buses. It takes every available man to haul the prize ashore. But it was when cutting through the blubber that Inuits made an incredible discovery. It turns out, as well as being one of the biggest animals on the planet, it's also one of the longest living. Ancient harpoon points, not used for over 120 years, were found inside the blubber of 5 bowheads. The discovery was a big surprise for the scientific community. At the Scripps Oceanographic Institute in California, Dr. Jeffrey Bader studied proteins of the lenses of whales' eyes to determine their age.
So that looks like a good run, too, doesn't it? You see the peaks coming out on the computer, and then we have an equation that we plug those results into. And that equation has been calibrated based on known age humans, known age whales, known age all kinds of different mammals. And we plug the ratios in there, and boom, out comes the age estimate. And as you saw, the one we analyzed today came out to be about 175 years old.
This places the bowhead whale as the world's longest living mammal. They've evolved to live up to 200 years because they didn't have any predators until humans came along. Harbour porpoises are the smallest members of the whale family and only live an average of 15 years. They have many predators, including sharks, killer whales, and of course, humans. But their lives are also short because their small bodies rapidly lose heat to the cold temperatures of the world's oceans. So a porpoise has to work extra hard to keep warm and has a high metabolism, which tends to shorten lifespan. A whale is much more efficient than a porpoise in keeping warm. So size does matter when it comes to living longer. Big might be good for living longer, but fat isn't. It turns out that cutting the calories by eating less can also help make us live longer. Exciting breakthroughs in aging research focus on food. If you feed a mouse 30% less food, it will live a year longer. If we eat less, will more of us make it to 100? When there's little food around, some animals can slow down how fast they age. The most extreme example of cutting the calories and living longer is found in the streams of Europe. Amazingly, the freshwater pearl mussel is one of the longest living animals. It can reach 150 years old. Compare that to the adult mayfly, which only lives a few hours. This mundane little animal that you could easily overlook could teach us something about living longer. The mussel grows very slowly as it lives in nutrient-poor water running over hard rock. It's almost starving, and this seems to be the secret of its long life.
If there's not much food around, then it's not a good time to make babies. So it comes back to the story of sex to some extent. If it's not a good time to reproduce, then you need to hang in there until conditions get better. And so what happens is that the body puts more of its effort into the way of maintaining cells and tissues so that you can come out of what hopefully will be a shortish period of famine in quite good condition.
Because the mussel has to hang around for a long time to pass on its genes, it has evolved a long lifespan for an animal of its size. It produces a pearl just like its relative, the oyster. Maybe the best thing we can buy from this creature is the pearl of wisdom for longer living. If we humans eat less like the humble mussel, will we too live longer? The Japanese seem to work out for themselves some diet secrets for piling on the years. Traditionally, they have a healthy diet rich in fish oils, sea vegetables, tofu, and soy products. But people who live on the Japanese island of Okinawa have been found to eat less than those on the mainland, eating only until they are 80% full. This natural calorie control means that the people of Okinawa live a few years longer and have much lower rates of cancer and heart disease than the rest of Japan. Why should eating less influence our lifespan? The answer may lie deep within our bodies, in our cells. Inside each cell there are structures called mitochondria that work like tiny combustion engines. When food and oxygen are converted into energy during metabolism, tiny waste particles called free radicals are released. In large amounts, they pollute the cells, a bit like smoke from a car exhaust. Most scientists agree that free radical damage is a major cause of aging. But for some animals, nature has come up with ingenious ways to fight this internal pollution.
We see that the elephant has many, many more cells than we have, and yet it doesn't get cancers more often than we do. And it turns out that if you look at the mechanisms that elephant cells use to protect themselves against free radical attack that might trigger a cancer, as compared with what happens in human cells, that elephant cells are just a little bit better. They need to be, and they are.
Once again, size plays a part. Being big means a slower metabolic rate, which produces fewer free radicals. That's because a large animal loses less heat relative to body size than a small animal. Therefore, it doesn't have to work as hard to regulate its body temperature. And the elephant body is so good at retaining heat that at 35 degrees Celsius, you could almost fry an egg on it. But it may not just be elephants.
And the same applies when we look across the range of the animal kingdom. Long life or big body size tends to go hand in hand with better protection against free radical attack.
Birds can also offer us some tips here. Birds tend to have a high metabolism because flight requires a lot of energy. By rights, they should live shorter lives, but they can actually live 3 times as long as mammals of the same size. Some cockatoos have even been known to outlive their owners. One male bird in the UK lived to 82 years. The long lives and slow aging of birds is a puzzle, as they have such high metabolism. So what do birds have that mammals lack? Back into the cells again. There might be a secret in the structure of their mitochondrial membrane. Bird mitochondria are very robust and produce fewer free radicals.
The exciting possibility that comes out of all this science, and particularly the understanding that the aging process is more malleable than we used to think, that it can be altered, is that perhaps we can discover how to protect ourselves better against free radical attack. We know already that birds do it better than mammals. Maybe there's a lesson for us from birds.
Having babies later in life, being big, eating less and investing in cell repair all adds on the years. But there's something that's better than them all: brains. As mammals evolved, their brains became bigger and they became smarter. For one group of mammals, this has meant they extend their lifespan like no other animal before: primates. These Hanuman langurs in India can live for 25 years, not bad for a monkey. Troops can number up to 100 individuals. When you live in a group with many members, it pays to have more social skills. So the first few years of a langur's life are set aside in becoming part of the tribe. This is more than just rough and tumble. It's important early learning for the years ahead. Chimpanzees live twice as long as langurs, and they have a prolonged early learning period to learn more complex behavior. Sharing at least 96% of our DNA, like us, the first 10 to 15 years of a chimp's life are dedicated to learning the ropes. Communication, tool use and finding food are all essential skills that take a while to grasp. Like in humans, older females can live well past their reproductive years, enabling them to pass down their knowledge and look after the youngsters. And it turns out that caring has a bigger payback than just making you feel good.
One thing we can learn from nature is the value of caring. There's a lot of evidence that people who volunteer, do voluntary work, or are involved in caring for others live longer. And we see this in other animals. We see this in chimpanzees and in elephants, for example. And again, this may well be back to the fact of being needed, wanted, and being a positive role in society.
The brain we inherited from our primate ancestors has proved to be invaluable in extending our own lifespan. Humans have one of the largest brains of any animal in relation to body size, 1,400 cubic centimetres. That's as big as a melon. Our unique brain power can even allow us to become masters of our own destiny, but only if we use it. In birds, some of the more intelligent ones like vultures, owls, and ravens tend to be the longest lived. Ravens can live for 70 years. Experiments have shown that they have incredible memories and can use tools like primates. Stands to reason, when you live as an opportunistic scavenger, a smart brain helps you compete for food and find a mate. When they do pair off, ravens bond for life. Like ravens, circus elephants generally live up to 70 years, 10 years longer than most wild elephants. Some believe performing in front of an audience every day keeps their mind active. Just like muscles, the mind needs regular exercise to keep it in tip-top condition. One of the oldest elephants on record was Lin Wang, which means king of the forest in Chinese. This elephant served in the army, pulling artillery through the jungle. After a lifetime of active service, Lin Wang happily retired to Taipei Zoo and lived to the grand old age of 86. Taking a hint from long-lived intelligent animals, we know that exercising the mind can add on the years. The human brain can keep going for nearly a century, but begins to break down in old age. The hippocampus, the part of the brain that controls learning, loses its potency as nerve connections are lost. We've now found that these cells can be regenerated by keeping the mind alert and setting it mental challenges.
We know that things that stimulate us mentally are very useful. For example, chess or bridge or dominoes, card games. These are all very useful to improve and maintain our mind in terms of mental function, but also mental health, depression, anxiety. Also, these sorts of activities tend to be in groups, and there's again lots of evidence for social interaction and social gathering people together, able to discuss their problems, able to talk through any issues they need to discuss. All of these things help improve lifespan.
Your belly's tight, Bring your chin down towards your throat so the crown of the head rises. Nice straight spine. Just pump the
Use
arms
it
a
or
little,
lose
let
it
them swing,
applies to
keeping
both
your
mind
hips square
and
to the
body.
front. And the belly's
But
doing
even if you've been a
something
couch
after.
potato,
You've heard
turning
me
back
say
the
100
clock
times
is
before, you don't
possible.
need it again, do you? Each time, take it perhaps a little bit lower. Just work through the spine. Side steps, here we go. So, step out. Hamstring curls here. So, step on one foot, pick up the foot at the back. Now, tip forward from the hips. But as you do so, what's going on in the belly? Anything? We've forgotten that bit already.
So one of the things I'm looking at is taking a group of older adults who have known heart problems and seeing whether the right form of exercise can reduce their risk factors of coronary artery disease and therefore increase their lifespan. Essentially what we know is that it's better to be active all our lives to maintain a long lifespan and an active lifespan. But it is never too late. Even 90-year-olds who are sedentary now can take part in exercise, see rejuvenation of strength of some 20, 30 years worth of lost strength, and improve independence. I think the important thing to remember is that everyone is different and you have to have different exercise opportunities for everybody. The frailer a person is, the less likely you are to see them in an active class. You're more likely to see them in chair-based exercise. But the thing to remember is that it's a relative similar intensity. So in other words, that individual who is frail in chair-based exercise is getting as much relative intensity of exercise as the person who's relatively active going to a fit class.
The old saying, no pain, no gain, applies if we all want to live longer. But do some of us already have a natural advantage, the result of a genetic lottery?
4, 5, 6.
During the last few years, a couple of discoveries in aging science have rocked the world. Altering some genes can make some animals live 3 times the normal lifespan. And the very enzyme that causes cancer may also be responsible for increasing the life of some animals. If humans can harness the power of this enzyme without getting cancer, could we too triple our lifespans in the next century? In the past half-century alone, we've increased our average life expectancy by 20 years. Better housing and medical care have helped, but is there more to it than that?
Just to give you an example, in the UK, the Queen, about 20-25 years ago, would only send out a handful of telegrams every year to those over 100. Last year, she sent out nearly 4,000.
The longest living person on record was Frenchwoman Jeanne-Louise Calment. Jeanne-Louise was born in Arles, France in 1875. She was one of the few people who witnessed almost the entire world events of the 20th century. She died at a nursing home in the town where she was born at the age of 122. Jeanne-Louise's incredible innings may not be purely down to good luck. It could also be down to good genes. Her father lived to 94 and her mother to the age of 86. Long lifespans do run in human families, suggesting genes are responsible. Every human cell contains 23 pairs of chromosomes, made up of DNA, and located within are the genes that help control aging. There are around 30,000 genes in our genetic code. Scientists have already identified genes that cause us to age, but have struggled to find ones that help us live longer. But at the University of California, a breakthrough. Not in humans, sadly, but in fruit flies. Geneticist Michael Rose has been working to create a superfly that can live much longer than any normal fly.
So I wanted to create fruit flies that had a slower rate of aging compared to normal fruit flies. I threw out all the eggs laid by young females, and I only kept eggs laid by older females. Over dozens of generations, the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of these late reproducing females slowly came to live longer. Now they live about 3 times longer compared to normal flies. And an interesting question is, what are they like? And it turns out that, of course, they're genetically different, and to go with those genetic differences come a range of superiorities in health. They are not just alive longer, they are able to reproduce much more than normal flies. They can fly longer with greater endurance. They can resist deadly stress. In general, these flies are sometimes called superflies. And what these results suggest is that the way you live longer, if you're a fruit fly, is to be a superfly, not to be a regular fly, and not to have a long period of poor health, but to have a long period of better than normal health.
Fine, if you're a fly, but what about us mammals? Scientists kept a mouse alive for nearly 5 years, twice the normal lifespan, by altering a gene that reduces its blood sugar. Could we too alter our genes to live a superhuman double century?
As far as what the future holds, I think the first thing to say is that from a fundamental scientific point of view, there is no limit to how long an organism can live. We're learning that we are doing things already that are extending human lifespan. Personally, I think we will see life expectancy continuing to increase during the coming century, but I would be greatly surprised if it's increased much beyond 90 years.
So, if you have a large brain and make good use of it, keep fit, and inherit good genes, you've got good odds. But a little chemical help also goes a long way. Some animals have special chemicals inside their cells to make them live longer. Animals like turtles and alligators grow continuously throughout their lives. Because their cells never stop dividing, scientists think these animals hold a key to unlocking the mysteries of aging. Normal human cells can only divide about 60 times before they die. This shelf life is a big factor preventing us from living longer. Could we ever find a way to make older cells healthy again and eliminate age-related diseases like Alzheimer's and heart disease? Dr. Michael Fossel, a clinical professor at Michigan State University, thinks we could.
There's a clock in the cell. At the end of each chromosome of my cells, there's a little piece called the telomere. And that telomere shortens each time the cell divides. And it tells the cell to change gene expression, slow down division, and essentially come to a stop. That's essentially the clock of aging. With using what you might call the immortality enzyme, telomerase, which resets the clock, we find that you can actually change cells so that they don't age.
To find out how telomerase works, scientists have been studying one animal that lives along the rocky coastlines of our shores. The lobster. Lobsters can live up to 100 years and keep on growing throughout their life. They continually shed their shell in order to grow, and at each molt their entire muscle system undergoes a refit. It's like growing a new body inside and casting off the old one. The lobster's secret is in its cells. It produces huge amounts of telomerase that allow its cells to keep on dividing.
Most of the cells in your body have limited lifespans. They divide a certain number of times and they stop. There are two kinds of cells that can divide infinitely. There's the germ cell line that's responsible for essentially all of the human species. There's another kind of malignant cell. There's a pathological cell, cancer cells. And those also can divide infinitely. In the case of germ cells, it's important that we can divide infinitely. In the case of cancer cells, clearly we'd like not to. The fact that you have cancer cells is probably partly responsible for our aging in the first place.
Could humans ever crack the trick of constant tissue regeneration without getting fatal cancer? Professor David Liddle from the Institute of Health and Aging is growing yeast to find out how this organism manages to do just that.
We hope that if we can understand it better in yeast, we can identify the Achilles heel of this process in yeast that will allow us to design drugs that will inhibit these processes, that will allow us to improve lifespan without the risks of, for example, cancer. We make yeast behave like humans, and we watch that structure degrading with time, and we ask, how does a yeast cell respond to a degrading telomere? So if you imagine the end of a shoelace, if you remove the end, each time you use the shoelace it will unravel a little bit more. What we've done with our studies in yeast is we've identified the enzymes that are responsible for that unraveling, and what we've shown is that if you remove those nucleases, unraveling occurs much more slowly, and in essence the shoelace will last a lot longer. So if based on our experiments in yeast we can identify drugs that inhibited the same enzymes in human cells, we might very well be able to slow down the process of telomere uncapping in human cells and therefore extend lifespan, cellular lifespan in human cells, and that would obviously have potential to help with human aging. So I think it's reasonable to imagine that at some point in the future we could design drugs that will inhibit proteins that will allow our cells to divide for longer, and that may therefore allow us to live for longer. The price that we may pay for that might be that we get more cancer as we get older. But maybe when we're 50 or 60 we'll be happy to pay that price and to live a longer active life with a slightly elevated risk of cancer.
Imagine if we could keep our cells healthy and dividing constantly. How far could we go?
How long could we live? Well, we can't tell before we try it. The answer probably is in the order of 300, 400, 500 years. In short, a good long time. We just don't know how long.
If an animal has a large size, slow growth, and the immortality enzyme telomerase, it seems it's on the right track. There is one animal that has all three, and at 150 years lives twice as long as the average elephant or human, the great sturgeon. This ancient species has been around since the time of the dinosaurs. They keep on growing for their entire lives. A female can grow to nearly 9 meters and can weigh up to half a ton. It's the sturgeon's slow growth and long years we can thank for arguably the world's most luxury food item, caviar. As wild stocks disappear, more and more sturgeons are bred on fish farms. A single female can produce up to 4.5 million eggs. And there's good evidence that we can get a bite at the sturgeon's long life by eating its roe. Caviar is rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which is also found in other oily fish, such as salmon. Omega-3 has been found to cure depression and protect against heart disease. Few of us can afford our daily dose of caviar. Fortunately, nature has provided us with a cheaper and more fun solution to stay young. It's one the Italians have indulged in for centuries: red wine. Red wine contains a special chemical called resveratrol, which has been found to keep the heart healthy. The oldest living man on record was an Italian named Antonio Todd, who died just short of 113. He attributed his years to a glass of red wine every day. Other foods also contain the same chemical and can help lead to a longer life. Even one that we tend to think is bad for us. Chocolate from the cocoa plant has as many antioxidants as fruit and red wine. In moderate amounts, chocolate can help keep us healthy as these antioxidants gobble up free radicals that damage our cells. Chocolate has also been found to have a calming effect by releasing feel-good chemicals in our brains. And anything that makes us relax has got to be good. Humans have an average heartbeat of 70 times a minute, faster during times of stress and physical activity. although the old wives' tale of every animal having a set number of heartbeats has now been disproved, animals like the rat, which has a high metabolism, tend to have shorter lives. But if we humans opt out of the rat race, how long could we live? There is one animal that has perfected the art of doing very little, and it's the oldest land animal on Earth. Every day, hundreds of people visit this zoo in Queensland, Australia, to catch a glimpse of this creature, the giant tortoise. But she's not just any old tortoise. When Charles Darwin first visited the Galapagos Islands in 1835, he was amazed by the diversity of animals he found there. He later wrote about his voyage in his famous and influential book, The Origin of Species.
When he found her, she was the size of a dinner plate, and that's also how he determined the age of her, by her size. He took her back to England with...
This giant or Galapagos tortoise is called Harriet and was born in the Galapagos in 1830 and found by Darwin 5 years later. Darwin brought the tortoise back home to England. Later she was taken to Australia, and there she lives today, a record 175 years old and still going strong. Other well-travelled tortoises may be even older. When the 18th century English explorer Captain Cook returned from his second trip to the Pacific, he presented the king with a giant tortoise that lived to 188 years. For some animals, like the giant tortoise and the iguana, a big secret to why they live as long as they do is island living. With no predators to run away from, they can enjoy a life in the slow lane. It would take a giant tortoise 22 minutes to run the 100-meter sprint, whereas the current world record for humans is 9.77 seconds. If we switched gears like the giant tortoise, could living a life in the slow lane make us live longer?
First of all, stress shortens life, so we shouldn't be running around stressing about things too much. But on the other hand, if we are too laid back and lay on the couch all day and don't go out, we have a lack of social integration. We are also not using our muscles very much, and those two things will lead to a shorter lifespan.
By avoiding stress, we keep levels of the stress hormone cortisol down.
We know that laughing and happiness is important again. Each time we laugh, we produce, again, some enzymes and some hormones which help the body maintain good function. There was one trial, which said that grumpy old men live longer. In fact, when you look really closely at the trial, what they were talking about is men that were quite happy to stick to. They were stubborn, in other words. They were going to stick to what they wanted to do, and they had very positive attitudes about where they wanted to go with life.
Giant tortoises, like all reptiles, are cold-blooded. Being cold slows down metabolism and therefore slows down aging too. There is an animal which is 4 times older than the giant tortoise and is the supreme champion among long-lived animals. It has been alive since the last ice age. To see the oldest animal in the world, we must travel to one of the most extreme places on Earth. Antarctica. It doesn't come much tougher than this. Scientists have been investigating this icy continent for decades to discover the secrets of the hardy creatures that live here. Among them is the world's oldest animal. Not the penguin or the Weddell seal. international team of scientists works here to explore the secrets of life on the sea floor. On board the ship is a remotely operated vehicle, equipped with submersible cameras that can operate under high pressure. The submersible descends to a depth of 400 meters in search of an animal that can survive in this place of low food and temperatures below freezing. The camera uncovers the usual sea pens, feather stars, and, less seen, an octopus. But you could be forgiven for, at first glance, dismissing the prize of this search. Here is the undisputed #1 oldest living animal on Earth. It's a sponge. This one is the barrel-like glass sponge. Scientists estimated this sponge to be 10,000 years old. Some individuals have been alive since the last ice age. The freezing temperatures contribute to its slow growth rate. But it's not all about the environment. These sponges contain natural antibiotics that could make us live longer. One sponge from the Mediterranean is being used to develop anti-aging drugs. So nature may offer us ways of prolonging our life, but ultimately there is no escaping death. Humans have long dreamed of being immortal. The ancient Egyptians built the pyramids as huge, elaborate symbols of an eternal afterlife. And the Chinese emperor Qin Shi Huangdi in the 3rd century BC believed his terracotta army would watch over him after he died. Living things might have been on Earth for 3.5 billion years, but as individuals, do we have what it takes to extend our own lives? Our experts have their own favorite tips.
Maintain a positive outlook. It's being involved in society that really seems to have a benefit.
To avoid skin aging, avoid the sun.
For me, I think the key ingredients are to be active and to be curious. I'd like to combine the attributes of a squirrel, always inquisitive, poking into corners, maybe with the reflectiveness and the staying power of an elephant.
But the hard evidence comes from the animals themselves. Borrowing from nature, here are 5 things you can do. Have babies later in life. Eat smaller portions. Stay mentally active. Do regular exercise, especially sex. Indulge in foods rich in antioxidants. Yes, chocolate and red wine can be good for you. If you're going to change the day you die, the message is clear. It's time to make like the world's oldest animals.